Welcome. I'm Erik Fleming, host of A Moment with Erik Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenterik.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, welcome to another Moment with Erik Fleming. I am your host, Erik Fleming. So today I have one guest, and she is going to talk about her career and the connection that she and I have, and about entrepreneurship. So it's a brief conversation, but I think you'll find it fulfilling. And then I'm going to get to talk about some stuff that's going on I think we need to acknowledge. If you are a Black podcaster, it's award season for us. I know you probably have gotten postcards or emails from a bunch of groups, but the one I want you to pay attention to is the Black Podcasters Association. That's basically the only one I try to compete in because it's about us. And not only do they give out awards, but they also give out positive feedback. You know, after each award presentation, you can go to their website and look and see how you scored, if you got nominated or not. And it's really, really helpful. There's some things that you can adjust. Then they kind of give you those pointers. If it's something you can't really handle, don't worry about it. Just take it as constructive criticism. And, you know, you never know. Luck may have it that the next year you may get further consideration. But I promote it every year. I've been nominated twice by this organization. Have not won, but just the recognition that these are our folks that know about the work that we're doing. So I always try to promote them because they don't have the big sponsorships like some of these other groups yet, but that's coming as long as we, the Black podcasters, keep supporting them. And speaking about support, please go to www.momenterik.com. As always, I appreciate y'all listening. I would appreciate even more support, whether it's a donation or a subscription or wherever the case may be, or just some positive reviews. Anything to show that you support an independent podcaster like me would be greatly appreciated. All right, so let's go ahead and kick this program off. And as always, we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Erik. Tulsi Gabbard resigned her position as Director of National Intelligence. Thousands of activists gathered in Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, for a national day of action to protest congressional redistricting efforts that will dilute the black vote. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected a request by Virginia Democrats to reinstate a voting map approved by the state's voters in a recent referendum. 2 teenage gunmen shot and killed a security guard and 2 other men outside the Islamic Center of San Diego before turning their weapons on themselves. Search and rescue operations in Morocco recovered the remains of Specialist Mariah Simone Collington and First Lieutenant Kendrick Lamont Key Jr., both of whom died after falling off a cliff during a multinational military exercise. President Trump seeks to dismiss multiple lawsuits against the federal government in exchange for creating a $1.7 billion fund to compensate individuals who claim they were targeted by the Biden administration. Ed Gallrein defeated vocal Trump critic Thomas Massie in Kentucky's 4th Congressional District Republican primary. In the Georgia gubernatorial race, Burt Jones and Rick Jackson advanced to a Republican primary runoff, while former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms decisively secured the Democratic nomination. Dr. Bill Cassidy, the Republican senator who voted for President Trump's impeachment, lost his re-election primary in Louisiana. Colorado Governor Jared Polis granted clemency to former county clerk Tina Peters, commuting her 9-year prison sentence for voting machine tampering to time served. A Kansas City district judge temporarily blocked a state law banning gender transition treatments for minors. Minnesota prosecutors have charged an ICE agent with assault for the January shooting of a Venezuelan immigrant in Minneapolis during a federal immigration crackdown. And former Congressman Barney Frank died at the age of 86. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now it's time for my guest, Denise Berkhalter-Miller. Denise Berkhalter-Miller, APR MSM, is National Director of Communications for Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. NFTE brings the power of entrepreneurship education to learners, educators, and decision makers so all young people can own their futures. Mississippi native, Denise has 3 decades of experience in mass communication fields, including as a longtime digital news editor, newspaper editor, reporter, freelance writer, graphic designer, and public relations professional. She is president of the No Fear Finances Board of Directors, a small business tax support nonprofit in Alabama, and a member of the Public Relations Society of America, Alabama Ethics Chair, the National Association of Black Journalists, and Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. She is a summa cum laude graduate of Troy University, Montgomery, where she earned her Master's of Management degree, and Jackson State University, the I love, where she obtained a Bachelor's in Mass Communication with a Public Relations emphasis. She is one of the first African-American women in Alabama to become nationally certified in public relations. The former national president of the Council of School Board Communicators has twice judged the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's CO 100 America's Top Small Business list. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Denise Berkhalter-Miller. All right, Denise Berkhalter-Miller. How you doing, sister? You doing good?
Doing well, doing great. Happy to be here.
Well, I know I'm holding you up from something very important. Today is election day for y'all that as we're recording this in Alabama and in Georgia.
And we're getting out the vote today.
Yeah.
It's very important.
It's very important. So I'm glad that you took your time out to talk to me for a minute. What I want to do is start off with a couple of icebreakers. So the first icebreaker I do is I ask the guest to respond to a quote. So this is your quote. No one will tell your story as authentically as you can. Live your life aware that you have the starring role in it.
Absolutely. You are the star of your story, and far too often we let other people tell our stories for us. No, it's the same thing about your home. No one will take care of you the way you do. No one will tell your story the way you do. You do it best, and you should own your story.
Okay. All right. Now, the next icebreaker is what I call 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
3.
How should
I'm
we?
nervous.
Don't be nervous. How should we balance rights, freedoms, and responsibilities?
Rights, freedoms, and responsibilities, they all go hand in hand. But I think it's true that your sort of freedoms end where my rights begin and vice versa. I think it's important for us to be respectful of each other's rights, to be respectful of each other's freedoms. And, and to honor what I call the golden rule, but I think that it's the rule that rules everything, which is do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. It's really simple. I'm a believer in God, and God tells me that I should, above all things, love one another. And I think if you do those things, then all three of those things that you mentioned will be held to high esteem.
Yeah. See, that wasn't that bad, was it?
No, it was easy. It was easy.
So look, one of the things that I love is that I get to talk to people smarter than me when I do this podcast, but it's even more thrilling when I can get somebody from Mississippi to come on, and then somebody that went to Jackson State University to come on.
I love.
So let's start with the Mississippi part. Tell the world about Prentice, Mississippi.
Prentice, Mississippi is one of those towns you think you've heard of because you've driven through it. Otherwise, most people don't have a reason to be there. But it's a fantastic little alcove in the South where everybody knows everybody. Family looks after family. A lot of the traditions are still alive for not just African American traditions, but just those old Southern traditions. Southern charm really is a real thing down there. And so there's a lot I love about my little town, but there was a lot about my little town that I thought could be a lot better. And I still think it's a place where growth and development needs to exist. But yes, tiny town. I think we have, well, when I was there, I think there were 2 traffic lights. I don't even know if there are 2 traffic lights anymore. But it was that kind of place, It's sandwiched in between Hattiesburg and Jackson, Mississippi. So close enough to Hattiesburg, close enough to Jackson that you still could live what I would call a semi-urban life if you wanted to.
Yeah. One of the cool things that I did when I ran for U.S. Senate was being able to travel the state.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to Prentice, and they were playing Bassfield that day.
Ah.
And I had to go to the football game so I could get to a crowd and talk to folks.
That's where everybody in the whole town was.
Everybody was there for that Prentice Bassfield game. And so the PA announcer let me say who I was on the intercom. The people clapped and all that stuff. It was pretty cool.
Now it's one school system.
So it's Prentice and Bassfield or one
Jefferson Davis County school system now. Yeah, it's now one big, the rivalry has joined forces and now we're one big force.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That was something that we were looking at when I was up there in the legislature about consolidating. I think the only one we got, we basically got rid of the superintendent of Issaquah County because there wasn't a school in Issaquah. So you're like, why are we paying this guy money to send kids to Rolling Fork? We were like, what was going on with that? And then we consolidated Bolivar County.
Okay.
They had like 4 or 5 school districts and they only had 40,000 people in the whole county. So we were like, y'all can make this work. Anyway, why did you choose Jackson State University? Why mass communications as a major? And what was your college experience like?
So I attended Prentice High School. I was in the band. Our band was known as the Baby Sonic Boom. And, Jackson State is Sonic Boom of the South. But our band director, Ronald Wesley, had attended Jackson State University, but so had also my aunt and my uncle. Both are graduates of JSU, and my mother attended briefly. But JSU sort of was never a doubt for me. I knew right away that I wanted to go to Jackson State University. I had heard great things about it my whole life. I had been on college tours to Jackson State when I was in high school. I've been to many universities and colleges because I was part of the Beta Club and all these other things, the nerdy things that the nerds do. I did them all. But Jackson State always stood out to me as a place where I could find home. It just really felt like home. And that was true when I made it there. In fact, I remember one of my high school counselors, because I graduated third in my class and there was like 0.001 difference between our GPAs. That's a story for another day. But I graduated third in our class, and I remember my high school counselor telling me, you should go to an Ivy League college. She wanted me to go to Harvard. She wanted me to go to Yale, and I only wanted to go to Jackson State. And when I got there, like I said, it was absolutely the right place for me. The honors college dean became almost like a second mom to me, Maria Alvarez Harvey. Dr. Harvey has since passed, but she was like a mother to me the entire time, always looking out for me. She's the reason why I became a Thurgood Marshall Scholar, made sure that I did what I needed to do to qualify for that scholarship. And so mass communications, the story there is kind of funny. I cannot remember her name, but the dean of the college at the time was a former editor of Ebony magazine. And we had that freshman orientation. We all knew we wanted to be in the mass comms field, but I didn't know which area. I honestly didn't. I just knew I wanted to be a storyteller. And so they divided the room into three. And they said, everyone who wants to be a broadcast journalist, go to that side of the room. Everyone who wants to be in print, go to that side of the room. And everyone who wants to be in public relations, go to the center. Well, the people on the left, there was a large number of people over there. When they said broadcast, like over 75% of the room went to that space. And there were like 10 people left. And I looked around and I said, hey, this is going to be my competition. So I'm going to go to the center. I went to the smallest number because I always wanted to be unique. But I felt like God was leading me to that space of public relations because, again, I wanted to tell the story of people who can't tell the story for themselves. I wanted to amplify the stories of people who often are in the shadows. And so mass communications was the best way to do that. And public relations has proven to be a wonderful way to do that. And Ebony magazine editor, who was our dean, she told me, she said, start in journalism because you can always make the transition from journalism to public relations, but it's so hard to make it in the other direction. And that's what I did. 13 years journalism.
Yeah, because I was trying to think who that was, because I know Dr. Anthony was over it then when I was there.
Was Dr.
Yeah, and then I forgot who took over after her. And then I knew Anthony Dean had it for a minute. And then Bobby Walker, she wasn't the dean, but she was, she was on TV and everybody loved her because, she handled pretty much the radio and TV part of it.
Yes, I remember her. Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. So my thing was, I didn't have that JSU connection other than Walter Payton, because I grew up in Chicago. Walter Payton was like a god, just like Michael Jordan is now. And so that was my only real connection to Jackson State, but I became Dr. Harvey baby too.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got there. And they told me I didn't have to pay for anything. I didn't have to pay for books. I was like, yeah, sold. Because Princeton was like, you in, but you got to pay this first year. My dad was like, oh yeah, but I'll make that happen. I was like, really? Yeah. It's like, no, man, you're not going in debt just for me to go to college. When my mom's alma mater was West Virginia State.
Yeah.
And they offered me a scholarship too, but then they also sent me a bill saying I had burned a room up. So it was like,
was that true, sir?
No, I hadn't been there. It was a guy who spelled his last name Flemons. But they sent me the bill saying I had burnt the room up. And I was like, I hadn't even been to West Virginia.
Mistaken identity.
Yeah. So I was like, this sounds like that's going to be a bad rap. My mom was not happy about that being an alum. But, so I mean, and I felt that, once I got there to Jackson State, when you talk about being home, and it gave me a chance to meet a lot of my Mississippi relatives. A couple of them was working on the faculty down there and all that. So it was really, really cool. And I wouldn't have traded it for anything else in the world. So you have been a member of the press and a public relations professional. In the world we live in now, which profession is the most challenging to you?
So I just recently I'm chair of the Alabama Public Relations Society of America's chapter and chair of the ethics committee. And so I hosted an event with local journalists and public relations professionals to talk about something very similar to that. And honestly, I think both of those professions now are being called on to fill an important need for our country at this moment. Ethical, factual, accurate, meaningful conversations and discourse and information sharing and reporting all of that is far more important than it's ever been in the history of our country, in my opinion, right now. Particularly with the advent of AI, that whole fake news mantra has gone from somebody's philosophy to an actual reality in our country right now. And so I just think both roles are crucially important at this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know if you were going to have a preference or you were going to say both. So it's real interesting. You being real deep in that field and in high esteem in that field, that you would say that both.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been on both sides of the table, and I can see how both roles, are important, like I said, to factual and accurate storytelling.
Yeah. All right. So what is NFTE, and how did your professional journey lead you to work with them?
So the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, NFTE, has been around since 1987, 40 years. Coming up in next year. And the organization is a global nonprofit that helps young people learn how to start their own businesses. And we do that through teaching the entrepreneurial mindset. These are skills, durable skills. Some people call them soft skills. We call them durable and important skills that every young person needs to succeed in life. Mass communications has brought me to this space because I've always been a mission-driven employee, even when I was in journalism, mission-driven. And so the mission matters to me. And as the National Director of Communications for NFTE, I'm given the blessing and the pleasure of serving these young people and helping them activate within them and ignite within them something that they already have, which is sort of that, that hustle energy that we had at Jackson State University, that thing that got us, that honestly, most people in the HBCU world have. We know that we have to have that drive and that vision, those goals. We have to grind. We have to use our grit to get ahead in life, and not just, and we don't just settle for good enough. We want excellence. Excellence was a word I heard all the time at VI Love at Jackson State University. And it resonates with me. And working in the nonprofit space gives you an opportunity to sort of exercise that excellence that they taught us at Jackson State.
Yeah. Dr. Hefner was, let's see, my freshman year, Dr. Peoples was still the president.
Yeah.
And then I had Dr. Hefner's first 3 years, and he had that commitment to excellence. And we were like, Doc, that's like the Raider symbol. I don't know if we can just take that. He was like,
and he did.
He said, but we're just as committed as they are, Mr. Fleming. Yes, sir. Okay. All right. I just thought I'd bring that up to you. Why is teaching entrepreneurship important? You talked about, the tapping into the hustle aspect and all that, but just why is teaching it important?
So I believe teaching entrepreneurship shouldn't be an elective. I believe entrepreneurship education should be a requirement for all kids. Let's think about when we were in school. I don't remember having a class that taught me how to balance a checkbook. I don't remember having a class that taught me how to make my money work for me. I don't remember having a class that taught me how to communicate and collaborate with other people, how to be flexible. It was all about don't make mistakes rather than taking calculated risks and learning lessons from those mistakes and sort of adapting to the environment or what's new and what's on the horizon. All those things that are really important to, we don't know what jobs are going to exist tomorrow. We really don't. Some of these jobs that exist today just didn't in the past. Some of the jobs that kids are going to school for now are in question whether or not those jobs will exist by the time they graduate high school. Graduate college. And so you have to have the skills that allow you to be future proof. And entrepreneurship education and teaching that gives a whole generation after generation, the skills that they need to apply to whatever pathway they choose to go on in life. And so, and I think educators are seeing that. Really, most of the people who bring us into their school systems, they are the educators. They hear it from another teacher. They learn from a former student, or they were former students of ours, and they see the value in it. And that's why they teach NFTE.
Yeah. So it's funny you should say that, because when I was in the legislature, I introduced a bill to make teaching entrepreneurship and financial literacy required high school curriculum in Mississippi. That ended up being legislation to allow outside organizations to teach financial literacy in high schools at no expense to the school district.
Wow.
And that was like the Mississippi Association for Realtors got behind that.
Yeah.
So is NFTE currently looking to require high schools nationwide to teach entrepreneurship?
So there is a coalition. NFTE is part of a coalition of like-minded entrepreneurship education organizations who truly support the idea of bringing what we see as a successful mindset and battery of skills to all kids, no matter where they are. So the answer to that is, are we educating decision makers, people like you who are in the space? Are we gathering those like minds around the concept of teaching entrepreneurship education in every school, regardless of what your zip code is? Absolutely. Absolutely. We are supporting that move. In fact, that's our purpose. Our purpose is to start this global movement for equitable access to entrepreneurship education, no matter where you are.
Well, that's good to hear, because when I was in the legislature and was doing that kind of, pushing that legislation, NFTE did step in and, write letters and stuff saying, hey, support this bill, blah, blah, this, that, and other. And, I think people caught wind of what I was trying to do, because the majority of the kids, at least in the Mississippi public schools, were Black.
Yeah.
And I just felt that, in Illinois, we had to take, they didn't call it financial literacy, they called it consumer education. And so we had to take a class to graduate. It was like public law, and then first semester, and then the second semester of senior year, we had to take consumer ed. So consumer ed was being able to write a checkbook, balance a checkbook, write a check, train schedules, all that stuff. We literally had to take a test, and they gave us like a train schedule that nobody else would ever get life. And we had to figure out what bus we needed to catch, and what time and all that stuff in order to graduate. They called it the functional literacy exam back in the day.
Yeah.
So, but I just believe that it made sense to teach young Black folks how to start their own business. And even if they don't start their own business, they would be better employees because they would understand the dynamics of business, right?
Correct. We call those entrepreneurs. Yeah, entrepreneurs. You're using that entrepreneurial mindset within the job to create a better outcome, not just for yourself professionally, but for your employer.
The example I used to use was like, say for example, you're working to drive through a McDonald's and your friend comes up and says, "Hey man, let me throw in some fries." It is like, well, I would, brother, but it's like, that's going to affect our inventory and our profit and loss and all that. That might mean I don't get as much of a paycheck or a raise, and it ain't worth all that. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. That's right.
And so they said, that'd be kind of deep for a high school kid to say that. I said, hey, that's what teaching entrepreneurship would do for them. So
absolutely,
I really commend y'all's work, and I'm glad to hear that y'all are still pushing to try to get that into the everyday curriculum. So let's go ahead and close this out. When Denise Berkhalter-Miller's authentic story is told, what will be the summary of it?
You remember that, well, there's a poem that is often read at this is getting a little dark here, I'm sorry, but a poem that's often read at funerals, it's called The Dash.
Yeah.
And yes, I love that poem because that dash between our birth year and the year we move on, that dash between represents all the things that we are in this moment when we're living. And I want that dash to represent someone who loved people, who elevated and uplifted people, who spoke with truth and honesty, who fought to the very end, and who wants the world to not only be a better place, but left the world a better place. However I do that, if it's through others, so be it. If it's in a small way, so be it. But that's the dash I live every day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Finish this sentence. I have hope because.
I have hope because I am the lucky mom of two, and I listen to the dialogue of my children, particularly my son right now who is in college, and I listen to him talk about a world that he's passionate about, a world where there are you talk about rights and freedoms, a world where rights and freedoms are respected, a world of, I look at him and his friends and I see the diversity of that friendship. I see them working together toward their dreams. I see unity. In through my children, and I want more of that. I want more of that, not just for our kids, but I want it for our whole country. I want it for our world.
So Denise, if people want to learn more about NFTE or want to, reach out to you, how can they do that?
So you can find us online, Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, at NFTE.com. You can also contact me directly at marketing@nfte.com. And you can follow me on LinkedIn. Best way to catch up with me. I'll see you there.
How you think Jackson State's going to do in football this year?
Look, Jackson State has always been a winner, and I feel like we're going to be a winner this year too.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the tradition, because not only on the football field, but I think Jackson State should take a lot of pride in the fact that they produce winners in every field.
Every field.
And you are a classic example of that. And so it was really an honor to take some time out of your day, election day, for you to come on and talk to the audience. And I have a standard rule that once you've been on, you have an open invitation to come back. So if there's something pressing that you want to talk about, whether it's with NFTE or anything else, just reach out and we'll make it happen. We'll get you on. So Denise Berkhalter-Miller, yes, ma'am. I'm really, really happy that you came on, and I'm honored that you came on the podcast.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And right back at you, man. I am so proud of the work that Jackson State University is doing to produce not just good citizens, but good people. We are good people, man. Let us shine and revel in that. And I appreciate everything you're doing for our community.
Well, thank you. All right, guys, we're going to catch y'all on the other side. right, and we are back. And so I want to thank Denise Berkhalter-Miller for taking the time out on Election Day to come on the podcast. When we recorded that, she was literally in the parking lot of the polling place. So I really, really appreciate that. And it's always great to talk to somebody from Mississippi, especially one that went to Jackson State University, via love. You know, I can't tell y'all enough. You have to experience it yourself. You have children of age to go to college, or even if they want to get a master's or a PhD, please consider Jackson State University. It is one of the top historically Black colleges in the nation. And I would make the argument that I would put any of our alumni up against any alumni of any institution in the United States. People underestimate Mississippi a lot. I do not. My friends, I definitely do not. And my enemies, I definitely don't underestimate. They come from Mississippi. Because if there's anything I know about Mississippi, is that the Mississippi folks know how to fight. They know how to survive. And if you have some intelligence behind you, it's, you're a weapon. You're a weapon. And again, that could be a good or, a bad thing. But, everybody I know from Mississippi is a fighter. And those who I fight alongside with, I couldn't think of any other better people to stand with. Like I said, I grew up in Chicago. I will always love Chicago. I am here in Georgia. I'm learning to love Georgia. That's been a harder sell, but not necessarily the Georgians' fault. But I mean, this might be the place where I end up retiring and living the rest of my life. So I think the love will come, but nothing will compare to my experience at Jackson State and Mississippi. So yeah, it's always good to connect with folks, and especially on this platform. So I do want to send out prayers and condolences to the families of Specialists Collington and First Lieutenant Key. Those were if you remember from the news, those were the two soldiers that literally fell off a cliff during a training exercise in Morocco. We have this, I don't know if it's annual, but it's a pretty frequent exercise where we coordinate with some African allies, primarily the Moroccans, and have a training exercise with them. And the details of why they were on the cliff or how they fell or whatever has not been released, but we do know that they recovered their remains, and which was very fortunate considering they fell in the water. And so their families will have closure on that. But, none of the major news outlets cover that, I guess because there wasn't a war attached to it. But thank goodness I was able to keep up with that. And again, to the Collington and Key family, on behalf of A Moment with Erik Fleming podcast, I send my condolences to them. And I am, based on what I was able to read, they're very special people. And you have to be a special person, especially during this time, to volunteer to serve your country. I remember when that decision, I had to make it, and, made my decision to get out. And I wish that they had been able to get out on their own terms. So yeah, there's that. And also just acknowledge, even though this is not a sports podcast, I do want to acknowledge the fact that a young man who was a legend in the NASCAR world suddenly died. Kyle Busch, he was 41 years old, so he's 20 years younger than me. He was the most accomplished driver in NASCAR history. Some of you who don't follow the sport would have no idea about that. There might be some names that you associate with the sport, Jimmy Johnson, Richard Petty, people like that have transcended the sport. But Kyle Busch won at every level of NASCAR. I first found out about him through the truck racing circuit. He was the most dominant truck racer of all time. And there are a couple of black drivers, especially a black female that's currently in the truck circuit now. And so all of those folks that are racing the truck circuit, Kyle Busch was their North Star. And then he moved up to the traditional Cup Series, the NASCAR races that we know, the Daytona 500, Coca-Cola 600, Talladega, all those races. And he won, I believe they said 63 of those races in his career. And his dad was a driver, his brother, Kurt Busch, I believe his name was, or is, so he came from a racing family. His son is 11 and he's already doing amateur racing. So racing was in their blood. And, when I first saw it come across, I was like, oh, wow. Well, did he die in it? Cause did he die qualifying for a race or something? Was he in a car wreck? And they say he just got sick. He said he'd been dealing with something with his sinuses. And then the next thing you know, he's no longer with us. So I bring that up, and condolences to his family and to the NASCAR family. But I bring that up to remind us that this is something that we're all going to have to deal with. And so we need to take steps, whether it's personally or politically, to make sure that we can live as long a life as possible. This is the reason why we fight for universal health care for everybody. Because even, he had the best doctors and all that. It is what it is. But everybody should have access to the health care to give you a chance to fight it and to deal with all this other stuff. Ebola has come back. Measles has come back. So we really need a real healthcare system, and whatever is going on in Washington right now, that by 2028, that needs to be over with, right? 2029, I guess, when the new administration will come in. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because that's something that really transcends everything. But I do have some good news. So it's no surprise that since this is a political podcast, we have people come on that's either run for office, have served office, or are seeking a political office. And so this year I've reached out to as many candidates as I could. And I try to do that. And it's really hard, because you've got a schedule that you're trying to hit all these places and meet all these people. So I really appreciate those that blot out the time to come on and take advantage of an opportunity to discuss their platforms and why they want to be in this position. So far I've had 3 congressional candidates come on. And out of the 3, last Tuesday, the first one lost earlier in the year, but he was running against an incumbent, George Tornado. He was running against Andre Carson. But George has been a real solid Democrat in Indiana. And, we made a connection. And so I was intrigued to find out why he was going to run. And plus Indianapolis, that was my mom's birthplace. So I was intrigued by him. But had Kaylee Patterson, who has been building for years a grassroots Democratic organization in Idaho. And she won the Democratic nomination officially last Tuesday. So we're hoping she's running against an entrenched incumbent in Idaho. But if there's any year where that could flip, it's this one. And she has done the work to build a network that could possibly do that. I think they had a special election and that seat flipped in a state legislative race. So the potential, the attitude, the potential is there, and we'll get into some of the other reasons why I think it's going to happen. And then the other candidate that just recently interviewed was Jasmine Clark, Dr. Jasmine Clark. Dr. Clark has been a state representative basically about the same time that I came to Atlanta. And she has been one of the legislators that not only caught my attention, but reminded me of my passion for serving. And based on what we were seeing in some, past stuff in Georgia, past elections, I was thinking, okay, well, she would be in a runoff. No, not Dr. Jasmine Clark. No, Dr. Jasmine Clark put those folks to sleep. She got 56% of the vote, and there were three other candidates that were legitimate. You had a lady who was she was a dentist, but she was on Married with Medicine or Married for Medicine or whatever the show is. She was a reality TV star. She ended up finishing second. There was a young guy who was I think the president of the board in Gwinnett County. A lot of the influencers got behind him. He couldn't beat the reality star, right? And then you had a sitting state senator who's been there a long time, and he, successful businessman and probably one of the wealthiest legislators that was in there. And it's definitely one of the wealthiest black legislators in the state. He finished fourth. So Dr. Clark beat all of those folks. And so, all you got to do is just get out there and work, man. All you got to do is just get out there and let people know. And the old Bible saying, let the work I've done speak for me, right? Well, not Bible, it's spiritual lyric. Let the gospel song, term I want to use, let the work I've done speak for me. And I think the people in District 13 let Dr. Clark know that they appreciated what she's done as a legislator and rewarded her, because there's a Republican running in November, but she's basically going to be the Congresswoman. If you call her Congresswoman-elect, that would not be out of order, because she's going to win that. Now, 2 years from now, we don't know what that district is going to look like, because it is in the South. But as of right now, she's on her way to be the first PhD scientist to serve, first female to serve in the United States Congress. So congratulations to her. Now, the bonus was, it was a young lady that came on named Amanda Janu. And Amanda is a expert, if you will, or the main spokesperson for a theory called well-being economics, which some will consider like radical or whatever. But, it's an economic scale that's based on, instead of how the stock market is doing, is like how well are the people doing, right? Bottom line. And so Amanda lives in Vermont, and she's running for governor. And that's going to be an interesting race, because the lady she's running against, some of the establishment has gotten behind her, and including like Howard Dean and all that. But, and she just got some legislation passed that she's been crusading. So that's going to be tough. But Amanda, if you remember, is, like I said, she's an economist. Basically, she's, worked with other countries. She's worked with the UN. She's been a vocal community leader. And both of these ladies are young. They're both under 40, from what I understand. So it's going to be a really, really interesting race up there. And I, of course, since, Amanda's been on the show, I want to wish her well in that. But that was just kind of out of the blue. It was just like, bam, I just got a hit. And it was like, it was a commercial for her running for governor. I was like, that's so cool, So hopefully she hears this and understand that we're pulling for her. I don't have any beef with the other lady. Matter of fact, we might be connected, on LinkedIn or whatever. But yeah, I think that's cool. And another thing that's related to the election piece, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta. She served during the pandemic, George Floyd years. She only served one term and she left, and she was an advisor to President Biden. She was a commentator on CNN. She's been teaching classes at Clark Atlanta. And I guess she came out of retirement and decided she wanted to be governor. And with 7 other people running. Now let me break down who she beat. She beat the last Black person to serve in a statewide office in Georgia. She beat a former lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia. And she beat an incumbent state senator and an incumbent state legislator, state representative, amongst the other folks that were running. But you would figure out of that group of 4, that would have forced a runoff. Now, Sister Bottoms beat all of them with basically, she was running in the 60s most of the night. I think she finally settled in at 57, 58%. But statewide, she won that thing. So, and more Democrats voted in the Democratic primary than Republicans voted in the Republican primary. So, like you heard in the news segment, there's 2 Republicans running in a runoff. So they still haven't figured out who's going to run against her. But she is a Democratic nominee. And that was, when I say impressive, she was running in the high 60s and none of the Fulton County votes were counted. They basically called the election before they even counted the votes in Atlanta. That's how impressive her win was. And hopefully that's a sign. You know, there's already Black folks and white folks throwing shade at her because she's a Black woman, right? The white folks, y'all are who y'all are, right? But for the Black folks, I gotta stop that. Now, you may be who you are too, but, you know, like Dr. Givens talked about people in purity tests and all that. It's like if we tried to run a purity test on every Black person that ran for office, nobody Black would make it out the gate. You know, the young lady who succeeded me, who beat me, she and I were opposite ends of the death penalty. But does that mean I'm not going to vote for her, considering that on the other 9 out of 10 issues, we agree? On that one issue about the death penalty is like, well, no, that's a non-starter for me. It's not how that works. You know, it's just, you go with the best person. So anyway, you know, if you're into politics looking for perfection, you're in the wrong place. If you're into politics to look for people to actually give a damn about you, come on in. But you got to get your mindset right. If you're looking for purity in politics, that's just not how that goes. Anyway, so, you know, definitely going to be doing what we can to help Ms. Bottoms become the first Black governor. I don't think she's the first female, but she'll definitely be the first Black governor of the state. And it's long overdue, right? So anyway, wanted to deal with that. So I guess real quick, I'm going to mention this whole thing, and I'm just going to do it in what I think is happening. So this whole argument about this slush fund, right? $1.776 billion, get it? 1776, right? Is set up to give reparations to people that went to jail for January 6th. Those are the primary people. And then anybody else that Trump has pardoned that were arrested by the Justice Department during Biden's administration. So somebody kind of joked about it, but technically, based on the qualifications that would happen, Hunter Biden would qualify for this money. But I doubt if Hunter's application will be looked at seriously. But This is basically what it was for. It's to give people like Terrio and Rhodes and all those other January 6th, the Calais, any one of those January 6th folks that were beating up Capitol Police officers, that was tearing down barricades. Because I just want you to understand. They say, J.D. Vance is back with that stupid shit about they were just protesting. Still got a guy floating around here in Georgia saying they were just tourists, right? Clyde, I think his name is. But the reality is tourists don't take down police barricades. If you've ever been to the Capitol building since 9/11, pretty much have to go through a gauntlet of security just to get in. And it's even tighter now after January 6th than it was after 9/11. But it's not the open, when I was a young kid and my auntie took me to DC and all that stuff, it's not the wide open space that it was, right? It's not even the wide open space it was when I was active in the Young Democrats. You'd have at least one meeting in DC. You just walk around, standing there, presidential motorcade rolls through and, you stop traffic and going about your business, but you could just like get off the train and just walk up to the Capitol building, You didn't have to go through security or, I think they might have had a magnetometer by then, but I mean, you were in the building at that point. Now you can't even get through the building before you have to go through a checkpoint. They got gates and all that stuff. They didn't have all that back in the day. So when the January 6th folks show up, they got barricades, police barricades that are up all the time. So if you were protesting, normally you'd stay on your side of the barricade, do your chants and give your speeches and all that stuff, use the Capitol as the backdrop and keep it pushing. If you're a tourist, you're going through the checkpoint and then you get inside the building, see what's going on. Neither one of those scenarios includes physically grabbing the barricades or physically pushing the barricades down. Once those barricades were pushed or down or thrown away by this mob of people, then it became a riot. When you push past a line of police officers who are telling you to stop, do not advance, it's not tourism anymore. It's not just a protest anymore. It's a riot. And more correctly, an insurrection because of the mission of what they were trying to do. They literally were trying to get in and do harm to elected officials, primarily the Vice President of the United States. They wanted to disrupt the certification of an election that Donald Trump got his ass beat. And maybe we should just start saying that instead of saying, he lost it. Like they want to, I guess if I was in Congress now and I was interviewing, instead of asking a question, did Donald Trump lose? It's like, did Donald Trump get his ass whooped in the 2020 election? That's really how you have to come at these folks, because they're going to come at you with any and everything. You got Secretary of Transportation who is getting money to go on a road trip from the people he's supposed to regulate. And when he's asked about it, he wants to run and say, well, did you do something with your campaign contribution? First of all, you don't get to ask questions. Second, I'm not the one in the inquiry. You are. You did something that got our attention. So you need to address that. So, like I said, it may be a stretch, but I think we need to have somewhat of a hybrid between a Nuremberg trial and a reconciliation commission similar to what they had in South Africa, right? To deal with these people. Because they've got to pay for the damage that they are doing as we speak, right? They got to pay for that. So anyway, here's my theory about the slush fund money. And it ties in with this other fascination that the president has with this ballroom. So the Republicans are going to get with the gerrymandering and all that stuff with the districts, all this is tied in. So they're trying to stave off the damage that's getting ready to happen. The American people, the majority of the American people, the overwhelming majority of American people in all 50 states have made a decision that this foolishness has to stop for whatever reason. You said you were going to lower the price of gas. That ain't happened. You said you were going to lower the price of groceries. That hasn't happened. You said we weren't going to go to war. That definitely did happen. We're like bombing anybody in our way. Plus, you said you were going to reduce inflation, but you've put these tariffs on every nation, even a nation that has nothing but penguins. You put a tariff on every country in the world. But that jacks up the price of everything, not just food. That's clothing, it's electronics, everything. Cars, whatever. And then you said you were only going after the criminals for immigration. And then the next thing we know, nobody is picking fruit in Florida and California. Nobody is building houses across the nation. It's slow for people to have rebuilds from fires in California to hurricanes everywhere or tornadoes because a lot of that work was being done by immigrant labor. Since you want to run them out of town and terrorize them, not to mention to shoot Americans who protest that. And the American people are sick of that. So the Republicans are going to get their butts whooped on November the 3rd. They're going to lose the House. They're going to lose the Senate, right? And, and it's not going to get any better because Donald Trump doesn't handle losing well. So he's creating a militia. My ex-wife said it before January 6th even happened. It's probably the most insightful political thing she's ever said. She's probably a lot better now that she's actually elected. But she said that there was going to be a trial run. She said that Donald Trump is not going to leave that office, even after Biden won. I said, but he's going to leave. They're going to make him leave. She said, but he's going to fight it. And then January 6th happened, right? So my other friends who have had military and law enforcement training said, well, Fleming, this was the trial run, right? January 6th was just the trial run to see. And we've had some guests that basically acknowledge that too. This just was a trial run. And then after that, so what we're doing now is we're trying to fund the militia. We're setting aside nearly $1.8 billion for this militia to go after American citizens, basically, or anybody that defies Donald Trump. And we know that the loyalty is still there because two members of Congress who dared to take a stand on Donald Trump, well, two lost primary elections and one's about to lose because Donald Trump endorsed his runoff opponent, who the guy that Trump endorsed makes Trump look somewhat saintly. If not saintly, it's like Donald's not as bad as that guy, right? Old Ken Paxton. So, so the loyalty is still there. So, if you're talking about 30%, 330 million people, that's basically 100 million folks. So he's trying to fund a militia, and then he keeps harping about this ballroom. And every time he talks about the ballroom, he's always like, we're going to have a bunker down there. We're going to have like places where drones can launch and defend the White House. And, it's like the whole top floor is going to be nothing but military people, blah, blah, this and the other. Now, the east wing of the White House was for the First Lady, and they had the bunker, instead of having it directly below the west wing, they basically had it on the opposite side of the building for the president's protection. Because if you're going to bomb a part of the White House, you're going to go where the president's office is. So instead of building a bunker there, they put it, on the east wing side. But now Donald Trump wants to refortify that bunker, build this big giant ballroom on it, and then have basically a military garrison on top of the bunker. On top of the ballroom, which would be on top of the bunker, right? So don't be surprised if all this stuff goes through. Now, there's been some bucking. I think people are realizing this is a bridge too far. Plus, he's pissed off enough Republicans where now vengeance is theirs, right? They ain't waiting on the Lord. They're going after him now, right? Because they ain't got nothing to lose. They know they're not coming back. And then you had a bunch of them have already retired or, not running for re-election. So there's a group of Republicans out there that's kind of bucking some of the stuff he's trying to do. Nonetheless, the game plan is that by January 20th, 2029, Donald Trump wants to have whatever he needs to defy the will of the people and the Constitution and stay in office. Now, I don't know if there's any way after November of 2028 that you can keep him if they actually build it, right? But if in the worst case scenario, if the money is allotted and the ballroom is built, then some way, somehow, we got to keep him out of that bunker because he's on January the 19th, 2029. He's going, if that bunker is built, he's going in there and he's not coming out. And he's going to have this well-funded militia protecting him. That's where we're at. And he's got all these other folks. Somebody done jumped on my thing because I put that Malcolm X birthday wish on my profile. Now I'm starting to get noticed by the trolls. Somebody said something about all the places I've lived at, been crime ridden or whatever. That's how it starts. And then it gets into more stuff. It's one thing for me to debate people I know that are MAGA folks, but now when the trolls start coming. So anyway, it's a bunch of them folks out there. So between the internet trolling and those folks coming out of their mama's basements and, the militias being funded and all that stuff, he's going to have an army of people. And if you've ever seen that movie Civil War, that's what it will look like. And then the military will have to take a side, which more likely to be the Constitution, because that's what, when you go into the military, that's what you're defending. You're technically not even defending the United States. You're defending the Constitution of the United States. That's what you say in the oath, right? So it'll be a mess. And that's a nice word for it, right? That's the hellscape that's in this addled brain that the president has. That's where we're at. And you got people like Stephen Miller, who's already got his lockdown base. Chrissy Noem got kicked out of hers, but Steve Miller's got his. Steve Bannon's pushing that. And that's the only thing that will get some of those folks in this part of the bro podcasting world back in the fold. Bloodshed. That's why we're going to have a UFC match on the White House lawn on the 4th of July, right? So anyway, that's my theory on that. Now, I pray that I'm in tinfoil hat mode and I'm way off the mark. But just watching how he's trying to set pieces up, how he's trying to kick people every day, he's trying to figure out a way to get the weak out. As Homelander said in The Boys, and the Bible says, separate the wheat from the chaff, right? He's trying to get rid of all the people that are either opposed to him or are causing embarrassment to him or a weak link to him. And he's trying to fortify it so he'll never leave. That's why he can say things like, I like the poorly educated. That's why he can say things like, you'll never have to vote again once I get in. Or I'm not thinking about the struggles that the American people are going through right now because I got to focus on Iran. He can say that because in his mind, he believes he's never leaving. He can redecorate the White House however he wants to because he believes he's going to be there forever. That's the way his brain is working. So those true believers are doing what they can to make that work. It's just a theory, just a thought. Excuse me. But I'm just watching the pattern. So I pray I'm wrong, but that's kind of where we're going. I pray that even if you envision that, if you're in a position where you can stop it, then stop it. Right? All right. So, and then the last few minutes, I want to talk about the SEC boycott. So, since a lot of these southern states, all of the southern states have teams in this athletic conference called the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. Southeastern Conference is the most successful, most profitable, most competitive conference in college sports. You got the University of Texas, University of Florida, LSU, University of Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oklahoma, all these powerhouses in whatever respective sport, football, basketball, baseball, whatever. The SEC is always competitive. Gymnastics, right? Any sport, bowling, just pick a sport. Maybe not lacrosse, but just about every other sport. The SEC is, if they're not the dominant conference, they're one of the most competitive, right? Kentucky, Tennessee, right? All these southern states. I don't think there's an SEC team from North Carolina. I know South Carolina has one. Anyway, so the NAACP and certain individuals, former athletes, all that, are asking the young men and women who either play sports for these schools in the SEC or are thinking about going to an SEC school to play sports. They're asking them to not do that. They're either asking them to go to maybe a Big Ten school or, somewhere where these southern states don't have representation. Like Texas, I think there's like 3 or 4 conferences that would be eliminated in that category, but they're primarily focusing on the SEC because the SEC is the most profitable and most competitive. But they're really trying to convince these kids not to do that. And with the NIL money and all that stuff, people are like, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. Them kids going to go, right? They're trying to convince those kids, take your talent to a HBCU. If you want to go to a school in the South, go to Jackson State, go to Alcorn, go to Valley, go to Talladega, go to Savannah State, go somewhere, Alabama A&M, go somewhere else instead of going to one of the SEC schools, right? So we'll see how that works because strategically, the NAACP needs to meet with the NCAA. And the reason why I say that is because the period of signing has passed. The period of transfer portals have passed, right? So if those kids that are already in make that decision, the kids that sign, they can say, yeah, I was going to go there, but kids, without a political agenda, change their mind and decide to play for some other school, right? At the last minute. I had a cousin just knew he was going to play at Alabama. Next thing I know, he's lining up for Clemson. And then he transferred and ended up in Missouri, right? College kids do that. And especially now, without the restrictions that it used to be, right? It used to be so tight. Like if you graduated from a school that you were playing sports for and you decided, well, I want to go to this other school and play sports and get my master's. The NCAA was saying, if that school has a master's program in the degree that you majored in for your undergrad, you can go there and transfer and play that season. If not, you're going to have to sit out a year, right? And most of the time, if you're trying to get your master's, it's your last year of eligibility. So even with the red shirt. So all that's out the window now. If you want to transfer, you transfer. There's some kid, I think he just got drafted. He played at 4 different colleges in 4 years. And he has 6 years of eligibility because COVID, right? So, all that is fluid now. Those kids could transfer. They won't be penalized for that if they did it during the allotted time period. Now, if they do it now, it could be. So, if in NAACP really wanted to make it happen, then they need to talk to the NCAA and say, look, there's some kids that really want to do this. Let's give them the opportunity to do it without penalizing. They want to make this political stand. And the NCAA is not necessarily known for their progressive thought. Took them all these years to finally allow NIL to happen, like court cases, lawsuits, all that stuff. But we are where we are. That's what I would be doing. I would be focusing in on putting pressure on the NCAA to allow these kids to make that move. And we know that it's an effective strategy because one kid did it in Mississippi. One. And just a thought that one kid did it, that other kids would do it, Mississippi changed its flag. The star player from Mississippi State said, yeah, I'm not playing anymore. I can't continue to play if y'all not even going to consider changing the flag. When he found out that they weren't even considering it, because in his mind, he thought that they were always debating it when he was growing up. So he was like, well, maybe they'll change it. But when I guess it came to reality in his mind that it's like, these folks, they just going to do what they want to do. And he became in an age of awareness where it was like, I need to take a stand. And so he did. And so other kids were like, well, bro, I'm not even going to go to a Mississippi school, right? Next thing we know, there's a big old magnolia on the state flag now, not that rebel bullshit, right? That was one of the mitigating factors. But it was the one that I believe tipped the scale because about to cut off some of that money. Fans stopped showing up at the games, and the schools, to their credit, had been doing some things on their own, much to the ire of the future maggots, right? That were saying, you need to fly the state flag on the campus and all that stuff. Schools were gradually changing their tune. It took 15, 16 years, but they did it, right? So because that one kid, I forget the young man's name, he was running back, because he did that, just the thought of a domino effect got those people to move. And the president of NAACP is from where? Mississippi. So he saw it firsthand. He saw what this young kid did it. And I'm sure the Mississippi chapter of NAACP offered some support. Matter of fact, I know they did. They rallied around him along with other groups. So knowing that, that's why President of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, could confidently say, if y'all leave, or if y'all decide not to play, or if you don't even sign or show up, they'll change their tune about this redistricting stuff. Did I also mention that Derek Johnson, he's a trained, certified redistrictor, cartographer, I guess, for more technical term, as far as political cartographer. He was my constituent, and he helped me draw my district, right, during the redistricting process. And I basically got what I asked for, kind of, sort of. But my map was pretty close to what we drew up, because my vision was I was trying to keep other black folks from having to move into Clinton. And since I was the furthest west of all the black legislators in Jackson, made sense. And how the final thing ended up, because there was other ulterior motives. But if there's anybody that is an expert on, which is why I was really trying to get Derek to come on the show, if there's anybody who's been an expert on all of this stuff that's really happening right now, the redistricting and the history of fighting this stuff and all that, Derek is one of the point people that you need to be paying attention to. And the NAACP, right? I'm not going to say that it's not going to work. I'm not going to say that is too much of an ask. All I'm trying to do is lay out, this is how you could pull this off if you really want this to happen. If you are a parent listening right now and your child has committed to one of those schools, I would ask you seriously to consider not doing that. People need to be taught a lesson. And the quickest way to get white folks' attention is to cut their money off. When you show them that they do not have a path to money, they pay attention. So I don't think it's a crazy idea. Like any protest, it's going to be hard because people have their own mindset and their own reasoning why they want to do what they want to do, and they don't want to make stuff political, although everything that you do is political in this nation, in this planet. But we're just dealing with the United States right now. Everything that you do, again, just imagine you driving at an intersection and there's no stop signs anywhere. Politics will be pretty important at that point. You turn on a faucet and all of a sudden no water comes out, but you go to the white neighborhood and water is overflowing. You'll want politics then, right? You want your trash picked up. Couldn't need politics for that. If you want to make sure that you don't get poisoning at the restaurant, probably need politics for that. So get it out your mind that you don't need politics, or you want to stay out of politics, because the fact that you're even having a conversation is political. Because the job that you swear that you got to keep, there's some politics involved in that job. Got to get business license, right? There's a reason why you're off on the weekends, or you're only supposed to work 8 hours a day. It's law. It's politics. Nonetheless, I'm down with shutting it down. There's anything else we can do that's strictly Southern that we can shut down, let's look at and decide what we want to do. We may want to boycott Publix. I like Publix as a store. It's higher than Kroger or Walmart, but I like them. I got friends that work at Publix. But, I have friends that worked at Target, and I haven't shopped there now in years, I guess. We'll see. We just have to figure out something. Anyway, so let me just go ahead and close out with that. I wanted to cover some of those things. There was one thing I still didn't cover, which was the DNC autopsy. It is what it is, man. The autopsy basically said that the state parties were not being funded. They were being underfunded. I think that's being remedied. Said that the party has vacillated between stagnation and retrogression since Barack Obama won in 2008. Can't really argue with that. Blame Joe Biden for failing to set Vice President Harris up for success and leaving her in a weakened position when he dropped out of the race. Can't really argue with that. I think she pretty much says that in her book. But the most damning thing is a persistent inability or unwillingness to listen to all voters. Sternly worded letters are passé. It's over with. You didn't like Jasmine Crockett, but the people like Jasmine Crockett. That means you're not paying attention, right? AOC is toned down the way that she's done it, but she's still a hellraiser, right? The reason why all these hellraisers are in your party is because this is the party that has defended the people that have been oppressed. Yeah, we got our own little billionaire group class too that we got to deal with. But the Democratic Party is diverse because the Democratic Party embraces America. They don't have this white Christian nationalist supremacist mindset of America. So when you look at the Republican side, Kevin McCarthy even said, and you look at the Republican side, it's white men primarily. But you look at the Democratic side, it's diverse. So because of diversity, you're going to have firebrands from the Black community. You're going to have firebrands from the Latino community. You're going to have firebrands from the Asian community. You're going to have firebrands from the LGBTQ community, right? You're going to have firebrands from everywhere. So you need to figure out how to embrace that. Nancy Pelosi did. Howard Dean did. If you're in leadership, Mr. Martin, you step up your game. If it's time to tell some of those folks, appreciate your service, we need to run somebody else in your state, for Congress, have that conversation. If we need to call somebody a racist for trying to draw out black districts, then call them out. I'm just saying. Y'all can call it a rough draft or an unapproved manuscript or whatever. Those 190-something pages basically broke down what you need to be paying attention to. Because I'll be damned if y'all blow this opportunity that's happening this year. I've had guests that are basically saying they don't believe that y'all are going to step up to the plate. So they're looking for a third party to talk to the voters. And the reason why they have that latitude or that frustration is because our autopsy said that you have a persistent inability or unwillingness to listen to all voters. Persistent. You gotta change that. That's what we're talking about when we say real American leadership. We're talking about paying attention and addressing the needs of all Americans. Period. Bernie Sanders says that we should have universal health care. We should pursue that. Sheila Jackson Lee, before she died, said we need reparations. We need to pursue that. If the white folks think that they should get reparations for tearing the Capitol up, literally putting feces on the walls of the Capitol, they should get paid for that. Then what about my ancestors who built the nation? What should we get? Lack of representation? I don't think so. Less than living wages? No, sir. Denial of health care? We deserve better. Latino community, Asian American, everybody just needs to be left alone and allowed to be great and allowed to do the things that they want to do to contribute to society and give them a chance to contribute. Not to build a prison system, not to build a military industrial complex, build a nation. That's all these people want to do. They want to live in a nation they can afford, financially, spiritually, mentally, or psychologically even. Right? That's it. They want to have peace of mind. They'll deal with tragedies like death and illness. But if they got the peace of mind to know that they can fight that illness with all the resources America has to bear, that's still peace of mind, even if they're struggling. Peace is not supposed to be just on Sunday morning when you go to church. Peace is supposed to follow you wherever you go. That's what Jesus said. He would say, peace be with you. Right? Nonetheless, I've talked way longer than I had planned to, but I just had to throw that in. It's like, guys, this is our time. This is our moment. We're taught there's a reason why it was stressed to us in the Christian faith that for 20 years before Jesus started preaching, 2017, 20, that Jesus was trained as a carpenter, because it was to remind us that in order to be an example, in order to evangelize, you have to build something. You have to build something from what was broken. And Donald Trump and his administration and his sycophants are destroying as many institutions, if not the government itself. So when we get in, this is our opportunity to build something better in line with the vision that was put into that piece of parchment called the U.S. Constitution to fulfill the dream of a slaveholder who said that all men were created equal. Again, if you don't understand divine intervention, I don't know how else to explain it. A man who owned slaves said that all men are created equal and put it down on paper. That's God working through somebody, not Donald Trump. Right? What he's doing, he's just being a gangster. That's point blank, period. The guy who wrote The Godfather couldn't envision a president like that. He created Don Corleone. Mario Puzo, ain't no way he could have thought of a president being gangster like this. But this, again, is an opportunity to rebuild and create America. It was, I I'm trying to think real quick before I get out of here. Langston Hughes, who I believe he said something. Yeah, he said, "Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be." This is the moment. This is the time that Langston Hughes was talking about. We can make it the America it should be. But we got to do our part. We got to pay attention. We got to vote. We got to be vocal. Got to kick some butt. And I'm down with it. I'm down with it. All right. That's all I got. Thank y'all for listening. Till next time.
NBG Podcast Network.